Thank y'all. Please have a seat. Thank you very much. You're very kind, and it's a great honor to be back here with you one more time. Francis, congratulations, and thank you for your many years of service to conservative principles in North Carolina. And so much of the great work that we've been able to do in North Carolina through the years is greatly due to the work that you guys do here at Civitas. So thank you. And Donald, congratulations as well to leading things off here. I think I've done this event maybe 3 or 4 times. I couldn't remember as I was preparing for this one tonight. And I feel like you do this enough. You come to a conservative leadership conference enough times and you start sounding like a clanging cymbal or a gong because you really say the same things over and over again. And that's probably a challenge with doing this more than once, is repeating yourself. But I think some things are worth repeating. We start talking about founding principles and economic freedom and liberty, and these ideas, they are worth repeating because we're not there yet. In fact, we may be getting further away in some cases, and so we have some challenges cut out for us here in front of us. And I think, we also would all agree that we live in really fascinating times now. It's a very unique time to be in America, where just a couple weeks ago, we see the nation celebrating young people all across our country marching on the Capitol and marching through the streets to take their very own freedoms away. It was just a few decades ago we were watching young people march for freedom, and now we're watching them march to take your and my freedoms away, and theirs too. And we're celebrating things like the breakdown of the family, and we're celebrating the breakdown of God in our society. And these are troubled times. And I think what's most troubling about it, as I have conversations with people, is when people say, well, those are just the times we live in. As if for some reason we have to accept this as our reality moving forward. And I think that's a dangerous place to be. I know when you speak at a conference like this, and I look out here and I see so many faithful conservative faces that are there going into battle with us every single day as we fight the tough issues in North Carolina. But it really disturbs me when people say, well, those are the times we live in, and then I guess we just have to deal with that. Because I don't think that really is the way it has to be. And I'm not one to suggest that there really is any such thing as the good old days. But I certainly think when I was a kid and 40 years ago growing up and riding my bike around the neighborhood that they were certainly simpler times. It was a time before perhaps government started to be in control of everything and government really started to run every decision in our lives. And it was a time when the bicycle was ubiquitous instead of the iPhone. And when we wanted to have fun as kids, we didn't get on our phones or our TVs and play games. We got on our bikes and we gathered up our posse and we went around town and we gathered up all our friends and we rode around and we played on all that dangerous playground equipment that's been since outlawed. We fell off swings and we fell off slides and all those things and hit our head. But when we came back, when it was dark outside and we came back home and our parents weren't worried about us and they weren't missing us, they knew where we were, they weren't afraid for our safety. When we came home and had a knot on our head or a cut on our knee, they didn't hover over us, they didn't sue anybody, they didn't call the government and say, get rid of that playground equipment. It was just a different time. And so, ultimately, again, the question is, why do we assume that this is the way it has to be? I don't think that this should be an assumption for us at all. And so I think we have to look at what are the problems that we face. I only have 3 points here that I'm going to make, and I'm going to be really quick. It's kind of cool as a conservative to be the warm-up act for Dennis Prager. So I'm going to be as brief as I can. I'm just going to hit on 3 points. But one of them is this thing called the political illusion. This idea was based on a book by Jacques Ellul back in the 50s, and it's really about the government control of everything, right? So we get to a point where we really do believe, and this is not just an idea of the left anymore. I think this is an idea of the right, too. I think you see more and more people on the right looking to government to solve the problems. I sit in meetings all day long as lieutenant governor, where people come into my office and they come in with their hand out or they come in with an idea how government can fix the problems of their community or the problems of North Carolina, the problems of America. And we also just automatically assume now that that is government's role. things that were foundationally and fundamentally based on values at one point in time in our country, just decisions that were real simple based on some biblical foundation or just pure values or morals, are now the responsibility of the government. And so again, similar to us making just this assumption this is the way it should be, we've done that with government too. It's not just scary that we go to government and look to government for the solutions. What's even scarier is we assume that that's what we should do in America. We should go to the government, and they are the ones that should fix it. We know that that's not possible. Government cannot fix the problems that ail us today. There's a role to play, sure, but government cannot fix the problems on their own. As government gets bigger, your responsibility and your role actually gets much smaller. We know that. It's the basis of our Constitution. It's the basis of what our founding fathers knew when they created our Constitution. So politics is, in essence, become a religion. You look at the left, and it's, the things that the left gets fired up about, and they get really excited about, or they get really agitated about when they're marching. It's of religious fervor. It's the things that wars used to be fought over that would bring this kind of fervor to a country in the past. And now you see it on issues like climate change, or the Me Too movement, or Black Lives Matter, or gun control. You name the issue today, the fervor has reached a religious pitch in America. Why? Because it really is the religion of the left. They truly do believe, because they don't have a hope in God. They have no hope in any higher power. They are hopeless. They truly do believe that but for government, but for the work that they do, there is no hope for America. And so it's a dangerous place to be. And not just the people of America outside of politicians. Politicians have gotten in this game as well. We hear empty words again and again, and I'm not just going to point to the left on this. I've got to point to even some of my colleagues that are Republicans on this. Champion the drumbeat. You hear it again and again and again. Government is bloated. Government's too big. We need to shrink the size of government. If you elect me, we'll shrink government. If you elect me, we'll repeal Obamacare. If you elect me, we'll stop funding Planned Parenthood. Well, what just happened a month ago in America? We get a budget that's another $1.5 trillion of debt. We get Planned Parenthood funded at another $500 million. We don't get Obamacare repealed. These empty promises that we keep getting even from politicians. Because why? Because their promise is that government can fix the problem. And if I just say it enough and I just repeat it enough, you're going to believe it. And you're going to believe that I'm going to go and do it. And so we need to move beyond this. We know that government can't fix it, but what do we do to fix it? We know that we believe that we must change hearts. Before we can change government, we must change men's hearts. So we have a lot of work to do. Why would we help our neighbors if government's going to do it for us? Why would we help the poor if government's going to do it for us? Why would we feed the hungry, help the sick, take care of mom and grandma in their old age if the government's going to do it for us? What is our purpose? What is the purpose of our family? What's the purpose of community? What's the purpose of the church if we abdicate our responsibility to the government? And so that's where we are today. And I believe the only way that we have a chance on this is if we get back to the basics. We have deviated so far. My wife likes to do this with my kids. If you stay on the right path, you're going to be good. But as soon as you start to deviate a little bit, that V just spreads further and further apart throughout your life. We've got to a place in America, we are so far away from our founding principles or understanding our founding principles that it's going to be real difficult to get it back. It's going to take a lot of really hard work to get back to the basics. And I believe that even as conservatives, where we'll say, oh, well, we got to get back to our founding principles. We got to get back to our Declaration of Independence. We got to read the Constitution. I believe it goes beyond that. I believe we need to understand not just those principles, but the principles upon which those principles made it into those documents. We need to understand the principles upon which those principles made it into the documents. And I believe that it rests upon God-ordained framework for those principles. I spoke here, I don't know, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and I did a speech on We Have Forgotten God. And I said as a nation, I was using some of Abraham Lincoln's words and other politicians' words throughout time of this notion that in the 60s we turned our back on God and we've forgotten God. And I came back and I said, well, that's really just a statement. I'm making that declaration saying basically what I said earlier. Well, that's just the way it's got to be. We've forgotten God in America, so move on. And I think we need to get back to a biblical framework here of remembering God. You know, the theology of remembrance throughout the Bible is really important. You've forgotten God. Let's remember God. Let's turn back to God. Let's do good to our neighbors. Let's return to a civil society. Let's remove incivility in the political arena. Let's protect traditional values and not assume they're a thing of the past. Let's restore faith and morality. Let's start promoting and celebrating the family. And I believe it's also time to stop taking the easy road. You know, a lot of us take the easy road every day. We take the easy road when we get involved in politics sometimes because, we just don't want to do that job that the politicians do. But we're really eager to have a scapegoat for the bad problems that are going on, right? It's easy to point a finger at a politician and say, well, they messed it all up. I guess I need to vote for somebody different the next time. Well, they messed it up or they messed it up. And, I think that's the wrong approach. Our Constitution's pretty clear, our Declaration's pretty clear, that this country is really, the politicians really should be enabled by the consent of the governed, and we really have lost that very basic reality. And so we need to take the hard road. Dale Falwell's sitting down here in front of me, our state treasurer, and there has been no state treasurer in my mind in the history of North Carolina that's done more work in such a short period of time as Dale. Most people would get into this job that Dale's doing and they'd look at the problems facing a state like North Carolina. They'd look at the unfunded liabilities and the healthcare challenges and everything else and say, boy, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just going to live my life. That's not what Dale's done. Dale has rolled up his sleeves. He gets dirty every day and he's solving these incredibly difficult challenges. And I think we need to stop putting policy band-aids on things and taking the easy road and get to the heart of the issue of things. What causes the problems that face America? Not just what are the problems and how can we throw policy band-aids at them, but what causes them? Things like stop blaming inanimate objects for our problems. When Cain killed Abel with a rock, God didn't come down and blame the rock, right? And we find ourselves at a place in America where we want to blame everybody but ourselves. If we want to change America, we need to look at our own hearts. We need to look inward. We need to look in the mirror. That's how we change things. We need to accept responsibility for our actions. We don't need to blame rocks. We don't need to blame guns. We don't need to blame knives. We don't need to blame cars because there's always going to be another object that can cause evil in this world, right? But we need to get to the heart of the issue. We need to stop blaming money for poor education. Our Constitution in North Carolina is pretty clear. It states religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools, libraries, and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. Let me read that again. Religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind. Religion, morality, and knowledge. Three-legged stool. We have a three-legged stool out there with no legs in North Carolina right now, and we're wondering why we can't fix education. Get back to the basics of the three-legged stool, and you'll start to see those things that matter come to fruition. We need to teach character education in North Carolina. Start at the basics, and we'll add those legs back to the stool. And I also believe we need to stop blaming the lack of government assistance for the breakdown of society. If you want to start somewhere, if you want to start in one place, you want to make a huge dent in the breakdown of society, then make a dent in fatherlessness. I know I'm preaching the choir here, but let me share some quick facts with you. Today, 43% of children live without their father. Fatherless children are 4 times more likely to live in poverty. They're significantly more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol. 70% of children in state-operated institutions come from fatherless homes. They're more than twice as likely to commit suicide. 85% of youths in prison come from homes without a father. If you want to make a dent in all these issues, don't make a policy, don't pass a policy, don't get government involved. Start to do something about fathers in homes. And then my final point is this. So what's the goal? The goal is what Donald said earlier. Words of Ronald Reagan in his farewell speech, to be a shining city upon a hill. This idea of America being a shining city upon a hill. I love this imagery, and it's not just Reagan that used it. Almost every other president before and after him have used some form of this as well, this city upon a hill. But sometimes we forget where this comes from. Most people in this room remember it comes from Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, and he said, "You are the salt of the earth. You are the salt of the earth." And then he says this, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Let your light shine before men." He's not talking about a city. He wasn't even, as John Winthrop came across on the Arbella with the pilgrim saying, "You're going to be a shining city upon a hill." He's talking to people. He's talking to people's hearts, making a difference in the culture all around them. Salt is a preservative. At least back in that culture, we use it for flavor today, but it was a preservative then. He was talking about preserving the culture and preserving what was going to come. And light just doesn't shine into the darkness. Light eliminates the darkness. As conservatives, we need to be that light that eliminates the darkness. And if you're going to do that, you have to let your light shine in the darkness. And so there's a lot of work to be done. But it's not unprecedented times, and I'll leave you with this, is I remember William Wilberforce. You know, when William Wilberforce was fighting similar battles for the abolition of slavery and the reformation of manners back in England in a very, very, very dark time, I would assume that he thought all things were hopeless. He dedicated his life to this effort. And near the end of his life, he saw somewhat of his efforts coming to fruition. But he had to be creative. He had to be bold. He had to fight against the establishment day in and day out. You know, we think if a week goes by and a piece of legislation gets passed and we don't win, that somehow we've lost. That's just the beginning. Sometimes these fights take years. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. So we have a lot of work to do here. But we have to be salt and light in our communities. Listen, North Carolina is a great state. I believe it's the greatest state in America. I believe we have more bright things to look forward to in this state than anywhere else in our country. The work that you have all done as conservatives in this state has created a great foundation here for families and for business and for people just to raise their kids. It's a great place to be. 6,000 new jobs are created here every month. People are moving here from all over the world every single day because they want to call North Carolina home. Our job is to be salt and to preserve all the things that made North Carolina great. And with your help, we can do that. Thank you for helping. Thanks for all you do. God bless you all.